Aarav Mehta was just a 22-year-old Indian student chasing his dream in Canada when he met Rhea, a seemingly perfect match who promised love, marriage, and a future together. But what started as hope and affection quickly spiraled into betrayal, heartbreak, and a deadly confrontation that no one saw coming. This is the chilling true story of a love scam gone horribly wrong, where desire met deception, and revenge turned fatal. Aarav Mehta had spent most of his life in a small town in Gujarat, surrounded by familiarity, routine, and the comforting belief that hard work could change everything. At 22, he carried the hopes of his entire family when he left for Canada to study engineering. His parents worked tirelessly to support his education, believing their son would one day lift them out of financial struggle. When he stepped off the plane in Toronto, he felt a mix of excitement and fear, but he told himself that sacrifice always came before success. Everyday life in the new country was far more difficult than he imagined. The rent for his tiny basement room took away most of his monthly allowance, and the part-time jobs he found barely covered groceries. The cold weather made him feel even more isolated, and long nights of studying blurred into early mornings filled with quiet exhaustion. He often felt invisible, walking through crowded streets where no one even glanced at him. Despite the loneliness, Aarav held on to one comforting idea: if he built a stable life abroad, he would find love, companionship, and a sense of belonging that he had never experienced. He thought having a partner who understood the struggles of immigrant life would make everything easier. This belief slowly turned into longing, especially during weekends when he saw couples laughing in cafes or holding hands on campus. The more he watched others find happiness, the more he felt something missing inside him. He wasn't desperate, but he was vulnerable, and that vulnerability became the quiet doorway through which danger eventually entered. What began as an innocent hope for a better future set the stage for a series of choices that would push him toward a fate darker than anything he could have imagined. Aarav joined an online matrimonial group after weeks of convincing himself he needed someone to talk to, someone who could make the loneliness feel less heavy. The group looked genuine, filled with profiles of Indians living abroad. Most users seemed to be students, workers, or long-settled immigrants searching for long-term commitment. Aarav scrolled through dozens of profiles, but nothing caught his attention until he saw Rhea. Her picture showed a smiling young woman who looked warm, confident, and familiar in a way he couldn't explain. Her bio mentioned she was a Canadian citizen of Indian origin, working in healthcare, and ready for marriage with the right person. The details were precise yet simple, giving the impression of someone honest and straightforward. What drew Aarav in even more was the subtle vulnerability in her posts. She wrote about wanting a partner who understood cultural values, respected family, and believed in building a future together. Everything she shared matched perfectly with what Aarav imagined for himself. It didn't feel like browsing through profiles anymore, it felt like discovering someone made exactly for him. He convinced himself this was a rare chance, something he shouldn't ignore. Rhea responded to him unusually quickly, which thrilled him. She praised his ambitions, his family values, and his dedication to building a career. Her messages were thoughtful and consistent, creating the illusion of stability he had been missing since arriving in Canada. Aarav felt noticed for the first time in months. He forgot the warnings he once heard about online scams and fraudulent profiles because Rhea seemed nothing like those stories. Her words carried warmth, and her willingness to commit early made him believe he had finally found the person he could share his life with. Little did he know, every detail that comforted him was carefully designed to pull him deeper into a trap he couldn't yet see. Rhea's interest in Aarav grew at a pace that felt flattering rather than suspicious. She told him she felt a strong connection, something she hadn't experienced in years. Aarav, starved for companionship, absorbed every word like a promise. She insisted that destiny had brought them together and that waiting too long would only complicate their future. At first, Aarav hesitated, but her enthusiasm was overwhelming. She claimed her family adored his profile and believed he was the right match for her. Aarav felt honored, imagining how proud his parents would be to hear that someone already valued him so deeply. Despite her affection, certain details about her life kept shifting. One day she said she lived with her parents, another day she mentioned living alone. She often claimed to be busy with long hospital shifts but still managed to reply instantly whenever Aarav messaged her. She avoided video calls, saying she felt shy or that her workplace had strict privacy rules. But each excuse came wrapped in reassurance, which made Aarav ignore the inconsistencies. He told himself everyone had their flaws and that trust required patience. As weeks passed, Rhea's urgency increased. She said she wanted to get engaged quickly because her immigration lawyer advised early documentation for sponsorship. Aarav didn't fully understand the process, but her confidence made it sound legitimate. She insisted they should register their engagement legally before planning any formal ceremony. She sent him links to government forms, screenshots of supposed legal documents, and explanations that sounded complex enough to be believable. Aarav didn't realize the emotional grip she had over him. She had identified exactly what he longed for: stability, acceptance, and a future he could rely on, and she used these needs to pull him deeper. Every message from her tightened the trap, and by the time doubt tried to surface, it was already too late for him to step back. Rhea's shift from affection to financial requests happened gradually, almost invisibly, as if she had rehearsed every step. She began by explaining that the sponsorship process came with mandatory fees, and because she was a citizen, she needed to submit the first set of documents on her end. Aarav didn't question her, especially when she showed him what appeared to be government forms filled with official seals and registration numbers. She told him she had already paid part of the amount but needed help covering the rest, insisting that once they were legally engaged, everything would be reimbursed through tax credits and settlement benefits for new immigrant spouses. Aarav used the little savings he had, telling himself it was normal for couples to support each other. But the payments didn't stop. Each time, Rhea had a logical explanation: a delayed update fee, a processing surcharge, a courier charge for secure document transfer, or an appointment confirmation fee for the lawyer handling their case. The amounts were small at first, which made it easier for Aarav to agree. Slowly, they grew larger, pushing him into a corner where he either had to refuse her or find the money somewhere else. He borrowed from friends, telling them it was for textbooks or rent. He picked up extra shifts at his part-time job, barely sleeping. Every time he hesitated, Rhea reminded him of their future together, the apartment they would share, the life they would build, the stability he had always dreamed about. She made it sound like a temporary sacrifice for a lifetime of happiness. By the time Aarav realized how much he had paid, he felt trapped. He convinced himself that stopping now would mean losing everything he had already invested. He pushed away the uneasy feeling in his stomach, unaware that he had already stepped too far into a scheme designed to drain him of every resource he had left. Aarav woke up one morning to a silence that felt heavier than usual. He checked his phone out of habit, expecting a long message from Rhea filled with plans and reassurances. Instead, he saw a blank screen with no notifications. He refreshed the chat, thinking there was a network issue, but the message window showed a single gray line: user not available. Confused, he tried calling her, only to hear that the number was no longer in service. The sudden disappearance made no sense to him. She had spoken about their future just the night before. There had been no argument, no misunderstanding, nothing that suggested she might distance herself. Aarav tried searching her social media profiles, but every account had vanished. The pictures, the posts, the comments, everything had been wiped clean as if she had never existed. Panic replaced confusion. He checked the email address she used to send documents, only to get an automated response saying the account was deactivated. The lawyer she connected him with had also disappeared. His website redirected to an unrelated page, and even the office address he once received turned out to be fake when Aarav checked it on a map. Reality hit him with brutal force. Every detail he believed, every promise, every payment, every plan, was part of a carefully crafted illusion. He replayed their conversations in his mind and saw all the signs he had ignored: the evasiveness, the excuses, the rushed decisions. Shame washed over him as he realized how deeply he had fallen into the trap. He felt sick thinking about the money he had borrowed, the trust he had given, and the future he had imagined with someone who wasn't real. For days, Aarav refused to leave his room. He couldn't focus on classes, couldn't respond to friends, and couldn't bring himself to call home. It felt like his world had collapsed overnight. And in the emptiness left behind, anger slowly began to grow, filling the cracks that heartbreak had left open. Aarav's life slipped into a darkness he had never experienced before. The shame of being deceived consumed him, making every ordinary task feel impossible. He stopped attending classes, ignoring emails from professors and messages from classmates asking if he was all right. He avoided everyone, terrified of being asked questions he didn't know how to answer. The walls of his tiny basement room felt like they were closing in on him, trapping him with thoughts he desperately wanted to escape. Nights became the hardest. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment with Rhea, trying to understand how he had allowed himself to fall so easily for someone he had never met in person. He felt foolish for trusting her, guilty for losing money that wasn't even his, and terrified of how he would ever repay the debts that kept increasing with every passing week. Most of all, he felt betrayed, not just by Rhea, but by the version of himself who believed love could save him from loneliness. His phone notifications, once a source of excitement, now brought a sense of dread. Each message from friends asking for their money back tightened the knot in his chest. He considered confiding in his parents, but the thought of adding to their worries held him back. As the days passed, embarrassment turned into frustration, and frustration slowly hardened into anger. It wasn't just any anger, it was cold, sharp, and persistent. It sat inside him like a burning coal that refused to die out. He couldn't accept that someone had played with his emotions, emptying his bank account and leaving him to suffer quietly while they moved on to their next victim. Aarav felt a new determination forming within him, one that pushed aside his fear. He wanted answers, closure, and justice. The despair that once paralyzed him began turning into a dangerous motivation that would change the path of his life forever. Aarav began his search quietly, driven more by desperation than strategy. He reread every message Rhea had ever sent, looking for small details he had overlooked. He scanned the fake documents she provided, checking the numbers, seals, and signatures against official websites. The more he examined them, the clearer it became that everything was fabricated with expert precision. But buried within the layers of lies, he found small traces she had forgotten to erase: an email header with an unusual IP address, a delivery slip containing a half-visible postal code, and a money transfer receipt showing a region he had never heard her mention. He spent hours online learning about digital footprints, tracking IP locations, and understanding how scammers reused fake identities. Slowly, patterns began to form. He discovered that several victims from different cities described experiences similar to his. Their stories matched Rhea's tactics almost perfectly: fast emotional attachment, urgent marriage plans, believable documents, and sudden disappearance. Some victims had shared details on online forums, warning others about a woman using different names but the same photographs. Aarav reached out to them anonymously, gathering pieces of information that linked back to one particular alias she had used, Maya. Following this new lead, he dedicated nights to searching social platforms, background check sites, and public records. A breakthrough came when he recognized one of her older profile pictures reused under a different name, connected to a burner phone number. After 2 more days of digging, he traced this number to a rundown neighborhood where the device had last been activated. For the first time, he felt a spark of hope. The scammer he once thought was untouchable suddenly seemed human, reachable, fallible, and within his grasp. His anger evolved into determination. He convinced himself that if he didn't pursue this, no one else would. What started as a digital trail was now leading him toward a physical path, one he wasn't fully prepared to walk but felt compelled to follow. Aarav reached the rundown neighborhood with a mixture of dread and determination swirling inside him. The streets were narrow and quiet, with aging apartment blocks that looked neglected and forgotten. The address he had traced through days of obsessive searching led him to a dimly lit building with peeling paint and rusted railings. He hesitated at the entrance, wondering if he was making a mistake, but the weight of everything he had lost pushed him forward. He climbed the stairs one slow step at a time, rehearsing what he would do if he actually found the person responsible for destroying his life. The apartment number matched the one connected to the burner phone. When he knocked, he expected someone confident, the glamorous woman from the pictures, someone polished and impossible to confront. Instead, the door opened to reveal a tired-looking woman in her late 30s, dressed in worn clothes, and carrying an expression that flickered between annoyance and fear. She didn't resemble the images that had captivated him. Her face carried lines of exhaustion, and her eyes held a practiced coldness that seemed to come from years of deception. Aarav instantly understood the truth: she was the real person behind the countless fake profiles. She was the voice that manipulated him, the architect of the lies that had consumed him. As he stood there, she attempted to shut the door, but Aarav blocked it with instinctive urgency. His thoughts raced as he scanned the small apartment behind her. Papers, multiple phones, and scattered belongings hinted at a life built on fraud. The realization struck him harder than he expected. She wasn't just a scammer, she was part of a system, a hidden ring that thrived by preying on vulnerable immigrants like him. The woman didn't show guilt or remorse, only irritation that he had dared to find her. In that moment, Aarav felt his anger sharpen into something unrecognizable, as the distance between victim and perpetrator closed in a way he could never undo. Aarav stepped inside the apartment without fully understanding how he had crossed that line. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing him in a space that smelled of stale air and old secrets. He looked around, overwhelmed by the sight of multiple phones, SIM cards, forged documents, and piles of envelopes addressed to men he had never met. Everything about the room screamed deceit. It wasn't just a home, it was a workshop built for manipulation. The woman, now visibly nervous, demanded that he leave, but her shaky movements betrayed something else: fear of being exposed. Aarav's emotions clashed violently inside him. Shock battled with anger, and anger slowly began overshadowing every rational thought he had left. He had imagined confronting her so many times, telling her what she had done to him, demanding answers, but standing face to face with the real culprit made his chest tighten. The weight of his losses, the money, the trust, his dignity, crashed over him like a wave he couldn't escape. She tried to move past him, maybe to grab a phone or call for help, but Aarav stepped forward instinctively, blocking her path. The argument escalated without words. She reached for a drawer, and he reacted out of pure fear, grabbing her wrist to stop her. The struggle erupted faster than either of them expected. Papers flew from the table, phones scattered on the floor, and the room filled with frantic movement. In the chaos, she lost her balance and stumbled backward. Her head struck the edge of a metal table with a sharp, sickening sound that cut through the air. The impact was immediate and final. A sudden stillness filled the room. Aarav froze, staring at her motionless body, unable to comprehend what had just happened. His breathing grew uneven as reality settled into his bones. He hadn't planned this. But in a single moment, driven by fear, rage, and desperation, the fragile line between seeking justice and causing irreversible harm had been crossed forever. Panic overtook Aarav as he stared at the lifeless body on the cold floor. Every plan he had made to confront her, to demand answers or warn future victims, seemed meaningless now. The room, once filled with scattered documents and phones, now felt suffocating, heavy with the weight of what had just occurred. He backed away, his mind racing, unable to process the sudden finality of her death. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but every step he had taken to reach her now tied him irrevocably to the tragedy that he fled the apartment, leaving behind fingerprints on the door, on the table, and on the scattered papers that could identify him. His mind was a whirlwind of fear, guilt, and disbelief. The quiet streets outside felt surreal, as if the city itself had paused to witness his escape. By the time the police arrived, the evidence he inadvertently left behind painted a clear picture: he had been there, and he had been involved. The investigation quickly uncovered the broader scam operation, linking Maya to dozens of victims across the country. The media picked up the story, highlighting the sophisticated ways she had manipulated innocent people. Aarav's own role, however, could not be ignored. Despite being a victim, he had caused a death, and the law had to respond to that reality. During interrogation, the officers discovered the depth of his suffering and the elaborate deception that had ensnared him. His victimhood was undeniable, but so was the consequence of his actions. The legal system treated him as someone caught between revenge and recklessness, and he faced charges that would forever mark his life. His story became a cautionary tale, a tragic illustration of how heartbreak, desperation, and misplaced trust can push a person beyond the edge. Showing that even the search for justice can spiral into irreversible disaster. The life he once envisioned, filled with hope, love, and stability, was replaced by a haunting reminder of a moment that changed everything.